Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to catch up with Kestner. We're on episode 8 now, so if you like this series, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. On today's podcast, we have Emily. Let's get right into it. Welcome back to another episode of Catch Up with Kestner. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I appreciate everyone for watching today. On this episode, we have a very important guest that I've considered to be an important figure in my life through my college career. This is Emily. Emily has been up to a lot of good things. The last time we caught up, I believe, has been about a year. So not too long, but long enough. She's been through quite a journey these past couple years and through the past year, and she's doing a lot of good things pursuing nursing school, but obviously a lot of good things along the way. So I wanted her to just talk about her journey, and hopefully we learn a lot about what she's been up to. So Emily, for the people that don't know who you are, quick introduction. Who are you? What are you up to? We'll start off with that.
Sweet. Yeah, so my name is Emily. Cass and I know each other back from Agape back in college. We not only started Davis together as freshmen, as a little frosh, awkward as can be, at least for me. And then actually we led the dance team together last year, which is just awesome. So we've definitely been through a lot together, and it's awesome. I mean, just catching up, just seeing what he's up to, all these creative projects. I mean, you've always been very passionate person, so I'm not surprised that you find outlets for it in the quarantine, so that's awesome. But yeah, my name's Emily. I am 24 years old. I'm from the Bay, and I guess just quick summary, fun things about me, I grew up tap dancing for 12 years. That has definitely been a big incorporation of my life currently, not just in college, but also, just in quarantine, give me some nice. Solace is just stay dancing. I also grew up drawing and painting a lot, so art has always been a big incorporation. Even when I'm in medicine now, finding ways to just like facilitate outlets, I guess, for patients also. I think that's really important, at least for me, and enjoying that with people I'm around. Yeah, so I grew up in the Bay, and then I went to Davis for college. Dance is a big part of that journey. I actually started out undeclared, went into art major, was going to be an art therapist, and along the journey realized that I did really love biology and anatomy, and so that definitely led me into nursing. That was a rough road to get there, just convincing myself I was good enough for sciences given this artistic background. I had a very rough science foundation. So, but now I go to school at Rush. It's in Chicago, which is amazing. Oh God, literally bless. Going from that to here, I mean, I would have never imagined that. So I started that in January. I graduated Davis 2017, took a few gap years as I applied, taught anatomy at Davis in the cadaver lab, which is awesome. And then it started in January at Chicago. Then quarantine happened and I left all my stuff there and moved back here with just a suitcase 2 months after that. So wow. I've been doing classes online since, so that's me.
Dang. And that brings me back like a few years back when, like you said, when we started as freshmen and you were undeclared, and I was actually thinking of pursuing medicine myself. And you're always like really good at drawing and really good at painting. And then it was just like, I don't remember the exact moment, but there's like a switch where you were just like in love with biology. You were in love with science, and, you started to just like really dive into that and just like hone in on your interest in science. And I know that you would like be really good at going to office hours and just like, when you could be tutoring others, you'd be tutoring others, and just like seeing your development over the years of how much you grew into love science and really break that mold of, well, I'm really good at arts, but I like science. Like, does it match? And, breaking that mold of like, yes, those things too can coexist. And I just love to see that you're incorporating those two different things in your journey now. But I know you started to talk a little bit about it starting in college, but you're in nursing school now. It's wonderful.
Woo.
Describe your journey of how you wanted to pursue nursing school.
Yeah. That also, just touching on your point, that's so crazy because, yeah, I guess I just think about us catching up after college, but it's wild that you've literally seen that transition of studying in Segundo and like this and
Yeah.
that, how rough that was. And me going to, what was it, doing like research I genuinely hated and I had no idea what's happening. But, I think you've always been a good encouragement and, hopefully vice versa. So that's pretty
Mhm.
cool to reflect on. I do have to say that.
Yep.
Um, Nursing itself, for sure. And um, yeah, I'll try to keep this as simplified as possible because it was
Nope.
very roundabout. I mean, everyone's college journey is so different. I know
Mhm.
at Davis, though, they had a very high like pre-med community there. I mean, and maybe it's just the people I was around. My wonderful roommate, I love her so much. She like from like birth, like knew she wanted to be a pediatrician. And so being around that, I'm like, yo, like I love her love for medicine, but that is like on another level. I could never match up to that.
Mm.
And she was also involved in other communities that had a bunch of people like that too. And so I think that was my surrounding of seeing people who are all pre-med, like since the get-go. And I was like, no way, you're not cut out for that. We'll find a different route. And so
Shout out to
yeah,
Patty if she's listening.
Howdy, what up?
Yeah.
You diddy. Yeah, super good. And she is definitely a great encouragement too of
Mhm.
just all those fears. But yeah, everyone's journey is so different. So if any of your listeners are in that same journey, just hopefully this
Mhm.
gives them some encouragement too. Cause I know I was lost like crazy back then. But yeah, basically I started out undeclared, had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew that I loved art and I knew that
Mhm.
back in high school, I actually wanted to be a special ed teacher. So I always knew that wherever I was going to go, I wanted to help people. I wanted to be
Mhm.
artistic and I wanted to be hands-on.
Nice.
And so that kind of brought me to art therapy. I was kind of exploring that. So I was like, maybe I'll get an art and a psychology degree combined. And then I thought, maybe that wouldn't be hands-on enough for me. And so I checked out 10 different other majors in the meantime, and then thought maybe physical therapy. My mom
Mhm.
has been a physical therapist for the last 50 years, just retired this year, actually. And
Yay, congrats.
I know, right? Go Mama Collins.
Mama
I always
Collins.
had such admiration for her because growing up as a dancer, like, and as an athlete, I was always like, oh,
Mhm.
if this hurts, she'd come over and just like mend it. And so I always had that huge admiration for her of having that library in her head. And I thought that, now as like going into like my second, third year of college, and like that's definitely a time you got to know your like where you're going. At least like
Yeah.
that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
Um, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, where I want to end up, but I know by the end of this, like I want to have something like as resourceful like as my mom has, like that library in her head, like all the time. Like that is, I don't want to just like memorize facts and figures out of a book. I want to
Right.
be able to apply and
Right.
like impact people. So I checked out PT. And in all these things too, I think it was super important for me just to like put myself in an experience for it. So, I mean, Davis has a lot of great internship programs. So I made full use of that. Found out I didn't love PT. It was a little bit too slow for me, which is all right. Shout out to all the PTs out there. Appreciate y'all. And then after that, I just like, why not check out this nursing gig? It's an open internship. And it's actually in the surgical ICU department at UC Davis. And man, I loved it so much.
Right.
And just because it was very like fast paced. And also by then I knew that if I wanted to get something out, it's just very much like you get what you put in, right? So I
Right.
was just
Right.
very proactive and asking to see things, help with things. And one of the nurses, like, I distinctly remember, I think it was like a switch almost for me. One of the patients was definitely just like trying to fight, get out of the hospital, pull out his lines and this and that, very combative. And in this huge like process, his lungs actually collapsed on him. And so the nurse pulled me over. He's like, hey, do you want to watch an intubation, which is the whole tube going down the throat?
Mm.
And I was like, oh, heck yeah. So I was in that room for that. And I think that was kind of like a click for me of like, this is so cool. So then it kind of started a new mental, I don't know, journey of, okay, I love this career. I'm not cut out for this whole science as part of it though. What happens next? And I literally just remember like my junior year, again, that's the time you kind of got to know your stuff. I was like, okay, I'm kind of doing a psychology degree. I love this. So literally just like in tears, I was like, what like do I do? And my mom literally just said, like, suck it up, go for that. You love it, check it out. And I was like, all right, mama, you right. So then after that, it really was for me just like getting experience and like finding out I love this, I love that. I really just kind of dove headfirst after that,
Hmm.
where I got involved with a student run clinic on campus, which called Willow Clinic, shout out
Yep.
again. And they serve the homeless population of Sacramento. And so working with that was awesome for me. I started caregiving for, really, it's just funny seeing how things evolve over time, because it was for adults with mental disabilities in Woodland. And so taking that like special education
Mm.
love and transferring it into more of a medical outlet.
Nice.
Um, so I just found I loved being hands-on in that way. I loved applying the sciences I was learning, and I loved helping mental health in some way. And then basically graduated. I love the anatomy cadaver lab, where you take
Right.
anatomy as a science as a student. So I taught there for 2 years, and that was just like everything. I loved absorbing it. I knew that I literally took myself as that position as a student of feeling like I'm not good enough. And especially in anatomy, I feel like you have all that in one room of like in an
Mm.
enclosed space of like, let me see this pro section, let me get in there. And it's annoying. I mean, I'll just be straight up. It's so annoying. And so I think I just was really real with my students. I'm like, y'all are good enough. It's just a hard work to
Mm.
put in. I'm here
There
to
you
help
go.
you in whatever way you need for that,
Right.
which is dope. So basically, after that, started applying to schools. Got rejected from all of them in California. Be totally honest,
Mm.
it was very humbling. I think that
Yeah.
applying to undergrad, you apply to a bunch and you hopefully get into one, right? There's like
Right.
a safety. So that was super humbling. I applied to 5 in California. I didn't make it. And I was like, okay, okay. I think after that, I just really, um, I mean, faith has always been a big part of my journey, but I think I was
Right.
really just like, yo, God, like wherever you want to take me, like make it obvious, like put me in like the back seat, like put you in the driver's seat.
Definitely.
And from that, actually, it was just a journey of 2018, 2019. Yeah, 2018 and 2019 was just a big roller coaster journey,
Mm.
because I found out about the school rush, which I now apply to. And I loved it. I mean, they're very involved in the Chicago community.
Yep.
A lot of aspects I love about it. And so I was like, cool, we're in it. This is like this school. I'm all for it. Like send me, let's go. And
Yep.
so I applied for their fall program of 2019. Um, and it was like off to a great start. I had an interview. They loved me. I hit it off super well with the interviewer. Her and I are actually really good friends still. I still on campus. And then I got the response back, and it was a wait list. And I was like, okay, okay, I'm not sweating. This will, this is just a patience thing.
Yep. Yep.
And from March until August of 2019, I was on that wait list. But I don't know, something about it just really felt like I was supposed to go there.
Mm.
And to such an extent that I was supposed to know on July 31st last year, which is wild saying this like a year later almost. July 31st, 2019, I was going to know if I was yes or no from the wait list.
Mm.
And I wasn't going to wait around for that. So I quit my second job. I ended my lease. I bought a plane ticket to Chicago, and I said, I feel like this is it.
Dang.
I feel like this is in the plan. July 31st comes, no response at all. Literally cried for like 4 days. Full honesty here, because I think, people just, it's just got to be out there, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, Cried for 4 days. I was so, confused and just like everything. But I
Right.
still flew out there to Chicago. Literally so many blessings for me to go anywhere in the country. It's a place that an old high school friend actually lives. She goes to Northwestern there. So she housed me for that week, which is a blessing, and
Right.
really just regathered myself. I said, what do you want? All of this. And then I went back home, kind of just confused. I mean, ready to reapply, but also just let down.
Yeah.
And so now I didn't have housing. I luckily had my server job still and bartending job at McCooney, which is very sweet. But then it kind of began like a 3 month process of me just couch surfing
Mm,
between friends' places. And it was in Davis at a time when a lot of people's leases were kind of overlapping. So I
mm.
actually kind of moved from people's abandoned bedrooms every
Wow.
week until their lease ended. And then I got a place in Woodland. Um, but I think that the craziest part of like, I guess the serendipity of it is when I was in Chicago for that week, I did reach out to my old interviewers and just asked, is
Mhm.
there anything I can do for my application that would make it better for the next time? And that was, um, I sent that email. And then a few days later, actually, not the same day, I mean, it could have been faster, but that same, or sorry, a few days later, August 12th, the woman responded and said, I would just, you're a great applicant. There's just a lot of other people in the
Right.
rolling, but I would really encourage you to apply for spring. Deadline is due tonight.
Mm,
And so I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, should I do this? And it was just a very serendipity moment because we're about actually to leave. We're like getting our shoes on. If we had left, I wouldn't have done it. But
mm.
I literally just pulled out my computer, submitted all the same documents. I asked her, what about my references? Can I get an extension? She said, don't worry, we'll pull it from the last application.
Okay.
And then I submitted it in like 20 minutes. And now I'm in that program. So wild. Roundabout, but it's been a wild journey. It's not easy. Gap years suck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, the waiting time, but it's worth it. I mean, it's been everything I could have asked for, kind of. I guess. Yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, there's so many things that I like hearing about that particular story, right? So, I mean, the first one when I think back to when you were saying you were really interested in providing for others, you're really interested in helping others. You wanted to be hands-on, and you want to find this career or this occupation that really suited who you were, right? And so I really liked how you were focusing on what you liked for yourself and how you can use what you liked and provide that as a service to others. So
Mhm.
with that, I find that ironic that you had your mom that was in medicine, you had a very close roommate that was in medicine, but you still had doubts of whether you wanted to be in medicine, even though that you were interested in that. So, the irony of that is funny because you would think twice about, am I good enough for this? I see a lot of people that I admire and I appreciate what they do in X, Y, and Z, but I don't think I can do it. Um,
Mhm.
and the irony in that was when you saw that in your students as a TA, right, as you said, and you'd
Mhm.
see their lack of confidence and their lack of their belief or their capability in themselves, and for you
Mhm.
to provide that encouragement, it's coming from a place of you were just in their position too, right, where
Yeah.
you felt like you couldn't pursue what you want to pursue, or you felt like you were not as capable as all the other people out there that were pursuing the same thing, right? Like when you talk about your roommate Patty, shout out to Patty, you were like, oh man, she's so passionate, she knows exactly what she wants and she's going to fight for every moment of it. I'm not the
Yeah.
same, so I don't know if I'm worth it, right? And
Yes.
so that idea, translating that into your TA position, translating that into applying to nursing school, um, I can really relate because I know what it's like to feel like you're not capable of something. It's
Yeah.
very natural for us to when we want to pursue something that we're really passionate about, we start comparing ourselves. Well, who's more passionate than me? Or am I passionate enough? Right?
Yep.
You say that we have so much desire to be something, whether that's going into a job or where we want to pursue something. And then we start thinking, well, am I good enough for this? Right. And I
Yeah.
briefly touched upon this in a previous podcast, but I felt the same way about teaching. I kind of jumped into teaching too, but I've always loved teaching, but at the same time, am I capable enough to teach? So I could relate to that. And I just find it really funny, but also really admiring that you took yourself out of that position of, am I good enough, to saying, no, you are good enough. And I'm going to tell other people that they're good enough. And I'm
Yeah.
going to prove to others that I'm good enough by you just taking all these different opportunities to, whether that's going to Chicago and failing, right? That was still part of the process of saying, no, I'm good enough. I'm going to trust in myself. I'm going to trust in God, or trust in this idea that I am good enough and whatever happens, happens. And you really leaned into that. And I think that's just crazy how you were able to lean in on your confidence. You were able to lean on a faith that you had going through the years, and you were just able to break out of that shell of insecurity, or break out of that shell um, of not having as much confidence in yourself, to being someone that was fully confident enough to travel to a different state, even though you weren't even sure if you're going to get in, right? But that
Yeah.
just shows how big the development was. And that's always something I really appreciated about you, was you always led with your heart, even though that you weren't sure. If your heart believed in it, you believed in yourself, and you knew that if you followed your heart, or you followed what you were passionate about, you couldn't go wrong. So that was always something I appreciate about you, Em. So it's just cool to see that, like you said, all things work out the way that it's supposed to work out. And I'm sure that Rush the first time around didn't see that, but the fact that you pursued and you went out on a limb to apply again on the spot, sending the same stuff, to reach out, I'm sure that they saw, well, this is the type of person that we want at our school. So really, really glad that you were able to show them just yourself. It's
Yeah.
awesome to hear that.
Oh, thanks, Kes. That was so beautiful. And that's so true. I mean, I think that it's so easy to like get caught up in like what this last year has been, what this last month has been, and like, man, like I failed this and that. But man, that was really sweet to hear that like wrap up of
No.
everything. That's so true. I mean, total insecurities, like
Mm-hmm.
not just empowering myself, but like my students, and like again, like that was such a great experience for me of just
Mm-hmm.
teaching, of being in that role, and yeah, taking that literally leap of just whatever, just be like, you know what, YOLO, we going to Chicago, whatever it takes. Yeah.
Crazy, crazy. And what gets me too is that you didn't get in the first time. Like, you moved there having this idea, having all this confidence, and having, taking that calculated risk, for you to end up on the end of, yeah, that it's not going to happen right then and there. Right. It's crazy, because sometimes we hear a lot of those stories where you took that leap of faith, and because you took the leap of faith, you got it. Right. There's a
Yeah.
lot of those stories, a lot of those narratives out there, which is awesome. But then we also forget the moments where we get so caught up in the possibilities and all the hope and the faith, and it's just not in our timing yet. Right.
Yeah.
So you took that leap of faith, you didn't get what you wanted. As I'm sure that was a process to kind of reconcile with, and a process to come to terms with. But at the same time too, just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it's not meant for you. Right.
Right.
So your timing happens when your timing happens, and it proved, like, seeing the smile on your face and how excited you are about the school that you go to. It's obviously worth it, right? Because it worked out. Whether
Yeah.
you saw it at the time or not, it worked out. So it's
Right.
cool.
Yeah, and that's even weirder now, just that this podcast is like a year after that happened, and it's
Mm.
just a year ago, like I was living out of like a bag in my car and being like, where am I gonna sleep tonight? And like
There you go.
now, I mean, I still have two homes in Chicago and here, but yeah, you know, and I think that definitely brings me back of like, even though I mean I'm doing online nursing school and that's definitely
Yeah.
not glorious. I mean
Right.
it's rough in many aspects, but I think that definitely reroutes me back. I mean, my general motto for a lot of things are like, you are now in a position of some time ago you only dreamed of being in. And that's not just
There you go.
nursing, that's literally like that could be like exercise goals, mental goals, like self-love, all of these things. And so I just
Personality. Yep.
really personal, absolutely, friendships, everything like that. And so even though like this time is really rough in many areas, like I just remind myself like how much I just dreamed to be in the shoes that I'm in now, you know, last year, 5 years ago, not even believing it could be real like 8 years ago. Right. And so yeah, definitely something that always reroutes me back. So
It's crazy. So we know how passionate you are, right? Our listeners know that M is passionate about nursing, and has been passionate about serving others through healthcare for a while now. So for the most part, we all know the power and impact nurses have, right? I know they're super underappreciated in different areas, right? But people like me, we appreciate our nurses. And for those that understand the power of nurses, we love you guys. But at the same time too, thinking about a time that we're in now, this pandemic, this COVID pandemic. We all know that the power and the impact nurses have, especially during a time like this. Speak about how this pandemic reinforces your desire to be a nurse, or maybe causes some doubt. Talk about that.
Yeah. Um, Again, it is such a weird time to be in nursing school. Not just because, I mean, a big part is because it's lacking the hands-on. I would normally,
Right.
this program is so awesome because day 4 of our classes, I was in a hospital, like working on patients. So it's
Mm,
like very off the bat. And so normally we'd be in there twice a week at the hospital right now. So it's very weird.
yeah.
But then again, it's again, I always kind of like remind myself it's a very weird time, but also I am very grateful to be a student right now because I think there's just a lot of things coming to light. I think there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
changes happening. Um, and I think I'm just glad to like be in the learner's role, but like
Mm,
I'm just glad to be a student as one absorbing this new information, but
right.
also being one that is a voice that's part of an institution that's making change. I
There
think
you
that
go.
is really impactful too. But I think that just this 2020 has made me realize a lot of things about nursing that I would have never expected to be part of the
Mm,
role. I think that is very interesting to consider. I think that applying for nursing, right, like I've definitely said, like my passion has grown over the years, and I think that
right.
is very much I love medicine, hands-on, I love people, and I'm going to be there to like encourage them, right? But I think that just from my experience thus far, I mean, 8 months in out of 2-year program, I would have never realized, um, honestly, like the role of like politics into healthcare. And
Yep.
maybe that's just my limited perspective beforehand, but really seeing how dynamic nursing is with so many other
Of
institutions,
course. Of course.
seeing, we all know about PPE shortages. We know about, I'm just really thinking about like being a future nurse in hopefully a year and a half. My patient flow of like how many patients I get a day and my
Right.
workload could be dictated by governor's orders, not based on, if the flu's out or not. It's, I mean, that too,
There you
but
go. Right.
the political impact is very eye-opening, I
Uh-huh.
think, in this time. But another, I think, even more important part is just realizing the role of a nurse is being an advocate for people. I mean,
There you
again,
go.
like I've touched on, like I thought nurses are like encouraging, which they definitely are, but like I would have never thought that the role of a nurse could be so involved in social
Mm,
justice and
yep.
advocating and educating patients. And advocating in many ways because
Yep.
like for example just even like medication, right, like a doctor prescribes something, a pharmacist fills it, but nurses are
Yep.
the last one to check it before a patient gets it, which means that if anything is wrong that they should not be getting it, that's like we're advocating for them of
There
saying
you go.
why is this there. Another example is like evaluating a patient, seeing signs of like physical abuse, we're the advocate of asking, or getting them a new home, getting them connected to social workers and everything else.
Right.
So I am pleasantly surprised in the very elaborate, I mean, umbrella, like just
Yeah.
everything of nursing. And that is something that's really surprised me. I think that also, I mean, just, yeah, I think that having Black Lives Matter movement right now in nursing school as well is very important, very impactful.
Yep.
I think that we have all generally learned about civil rights throughout history, right? We know that it's brought in many things throughout history. But
Yep.
I think what's been very interesting for me is learning about racism through medical history. And I think that's
Mm,
very important for me and every other healthcare provider in school or
right.
presently working to understand, like, I think where we're entering in history at right now.
Yeah.
I think
It's true.
that it's a general consensus that, like, maybe this stuff happened so long ago, right? Like, when in reality, like, me kind of doing some extra research right now of again like where I'm stepping into, like we're all in
Yes.
different communities that are playing a
Mm,
very big role that we need to like look into. And so
yep.
me stepping into like understanding medical research or historical research of medicine, seeing that hospitals weren't desegregated until 65. Like my
Mm,
parents were alive during that. And like
mm,
seeing that, you know, why like do Black Americans and like Native Americans have mistrust in in medicine and taking the time
Right.
to research why that is. Um, and also just, I mean, where we provide care and how we provide it. I think that a lot of that too, again, like why I say it's so wonderful being a student right now is because I think that there's a lot of things I'm finding of just biases, I think, in textbooks. And I think that now it's opening a lot of conversations
Yep.
to make textbook writers, lecturers, students just accountable for that.
Right.
And obviously, that's not saying that I'm immune to that at all. I think that it is the beautiful conversations that's being had and on our front
Mm-hmm.
mind, hopefully,
Yep.
of many other classmates of mine, of saying, what
Mm-hmm.
are your biases? You know, how is it impacting, how would it impact your care? Because when a patient shows up, you're treating
Mm-hmm.
them for what they need and how they need it, not based on
Right.
what you want to give.
Yep.
um and yeah, so, and I think that's something that I'm like very surprised at how intertwined it is in nursing, and I'm
Yep.
just glad that it is. um you know, I think that it's something that anyone who's interested in medicine should definitely spend time researching. I mean, yeah, I shared with you a New York Times article that just shared so many historical, I mean, just terrible racism acts like in healthcare, and like it wasn't
Yeah.
so long ago.
Yeah.
One of the popular ones is Tuskegee experiment of syphilis, and that only ended in the 70s for Black men, and
Yeah.
so things like that. I mean, um, so yeah, it's a weird time, wonderful time, empowering time,
Mm.
all of that to be a nursing student. And again, I'm very glad. I don't know how it's going at other nursing schools. I hope similarly, but I'm very, very glad to be a part of Rush that already commends itself on being a very, you know, equitable in many ways institution, but
Yeah.
not only doing that and talking about it, but hosting events of, you know, what is our institution doing, open, having open forums of saying from our students, from our professors, what do you ask of us to do? What can be changed and things like that. So yeah, interesting time. But probably one of the better ones. I think that all that has to be considered. So yeah.
I love how you took this question and took it in a different um, perspective than than I would have, right? Because
Mm.
when I was thinking through this question of, what about this pandemic makes M want to become more of a nurse or maybe less of a nurse, right? And you know, it was natural for me at first to think of the sciences or maybe the human psychological interaction aspect of nursing and how this pandemic, stepping away from your patients makes you want to be more with your patients. And I love how you took it to another level, right? Focusing on more that healthcare is not just science, right? And I'm not saying that for any institution, it's not just one thing. Obviously, all of the institutions that we live in this world are all interconnected in some way, some shape or form. And but I just love how you focus really on the socio-political aspect, right? This historical aspect of what it means to be a healthcare provider, what it means to be in healthcare, right? There's a lot of situations throughout history where being a healthcare meant being a privileged physician or being a privileged doctor or being a privileged, right, healthcare worker that provided for a specific group of people, right?
Yeah.
But now it's coming into light, like you said, of there's so many other populations out there, so many other cultures, so many other groups that have been disproportioned for so long.
Yeah.
And I know that we've come to realize this throughout college, right? Just being a part of, whether that was the clinics we were in or these student organizations we're in and advocating for these minority groups. But now for you to be actually in the healthcare system as a nursing student and unpacking that with your fellow colleagues, right? It's a different level because you're coming into that role now, not so much of aspiring to be in that role, to be an equitable healthcare, you know, professional, but to be a, an equitable healthcare professional. Like that is your role that you're coming into. And I loved how a huge part of what you've been saying is just identity, right?
Yeah.
Understanding our biases, understanding the privilege that we grew up with, understanding that Black Lives Matter, right? And how, in the past and currently, Black lives were not seen as something that mattered, right? And just coming to realize that all these different things of having to unpack our own identities and where we play a role in our profession, whether that's healthcare, whether that's education for me, right? We're all thinking about the same things of how are we bringing up the populations that we're serving. For me, it's students. For you, it's your patients, right? How are we changing their lives in a way that's, not following the trend of historical disposition, right? Of all these, how are we changing it? And that's crazy because we're part of history. And I think that's also another thing that I love about your answer to the question is we're part of history, right? We're in a point that is so interesting to say the least. I mean, painful for a lot of us, but very interesting just to say the least of, well, how do we move forward, as a country? How do we move forward as a nation to be better, to be
Mhm.
unified together, right? And to support those that were not supported for a long time, right?
Yeah.
In all these different groups. So to be part of that, it's unpacking our role as a professional in the jobs that we're in the as a student in a university that we're in, and just all these different spaces. And I just love how that reinforces your desire to be a nurse, right? Not so much. Not we'd even talk about the science part, right? We'd even talk about that, but we talked about our role and our identity in changing a political structure. Like that's
Yeah.
that's really important. I really appreciate your answer
Yeah.
to that.
For sure. And I mean, just like you said, everyone is in their own space for a reason of
Right.
holding such an important role. I mean, educators for sure. I mean, absolutely. And, medicine itself. And something else, just kind of touching upon like those parallels too, is just looking at my own education, my own nursing education, and kind of seeing what biases may lie in the textbooks. I mean, that's the idea of systemic racism, right? It's just,
Right.
it's not, we see these statistics of maternal mortality rates is 2 to 3 times higher for Black women versus white women, right?
Right.
And I was so struggling to understand, like, from all the nurses I know, I really can't picture one, being like, oh, I'm not going to treat them because they're Black, right? Like, I don't understand like that objective.
Yeah.
And it's because it doesn't necessarily, hopefully, work like that. It's because it's that systemic system of a bias being trained
Over
from an
time.
educator to student,
Right.
yeah, in the system, all of that. And so just really finding it interesting, even finding little snippets and like articles of like, of one that I find so important and terrible at the same time is just that Black patients report or have higher pain thresholds, meaning that, leading to that stereotype or idea that, they're over dramatic, and taking the time to understand like where does that come from. And honestly, like, even to like, you think that hopefully that wasn't true, because it does come from, unfortunately, doctors operating on slaves back in the day, and kind of clearing their conscience of saying they don't feel pain, they don't need anesthesia. And it's gone down generations of saying it's because Black people don't report or have higher thresholds of pain. But unfortunately, even in like a 2014 textbook, that was written like as a statement. And so now, like, as an educator yourself, as a student myself, as, you know, just leading down as our own, teaching future generations, it's just interesting, not just taking things that's in textbooks for truth,
Right.
and kind of seeing where that stopped. Like, at least, I mean, systemic is in a system, I mean, obviously,
Right.
but seeing where our halt could be in the
Mm.
movement of it, right? So,
It's crazy to think about it, right? It's just unpacking everything that we've learned, everything that we thought were true, right? We're learning all those different things every day, right? Some people are learning more than others. Some people are saying, well, this has been going on for a while, right? And so just understanding that being at different levels, but also working toward a common goal,
yeah.
is really nice. So I do appreciate where your head's at. So yes, yes, good stuff. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because I also appreciate a lot of how you've come to the beautiful position that you're in now with all these, um, wonderful intentions of becoming a nurse, right? Backtracking a little bit, like you said, you've always had a passion for the arts. You always appreciated the arts in some form, whether that was, drawing, painting, tap dancing. I know that you not too recent, we're working at a small cake business owned by your mom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a business that's foreign to me, so I'd like to learn more about it. I'm hoping someone else would like to learn alongside me. But thinking about the cake business and thinking about all the time and all the effort that your mom's put into build this wonderful entity, what's one thing from someone on the outside that um, wouldn't know what it's like to run a cake business?
Yes. Yeah, so just some context. It's a store it closed on Thursday, which is
So
fresh.
sad.
Yeah. But it is called Cake Art Supplies. It was opened in the 60s. And then my
Crazy.
mom bought it 21 years ago. So I have quite literally grown up there out of my 24 years of life. And it's just kind of funny of how our family got into it because my grandpa, her dad, actually immigrated from Italy, and he owned a bakery. And my mom always admired that, but never knew the basics of it until she took a class from this store in like the 90s. And then she just really fell in love with it. And she asked the lady, the owner named Elaine, or she didn't ask her. I guess Elaine approached her and said, "Do you want to buy it?" And she said, "Okay." So she got two of her good friends together, and they just owned it for the last 2 decades. Um, and that woman, Elaine, who's in her 90s now, has still worked with us. So she's quite like a grandmother to me. So yeah, it's a big part of our family. My sister has worked there a lot more than I have in the last number of years when I was off at Davis. But yeah, it's a little store, but there's a lot happening in it. It's definitely a big part of the community. I know that a lot of shows like Cake Boss and British Bake Off have become really big over the last few
Yeah.
years, which we love. We love watching it. But it was also so funny because we could tell who watched the show or not because Buddy, who is the cake boss, he's
Okay.
in New Jersey. They got the accent right, so he says fondant, and so we could tell as soon as someone watched it because we call it fondant in California. But as
Uh,
soon as someone came in, they said, "Do you have any fondant?" And we're like, "Okay,
you
okay,
know who watches.
yeah, exactly." So it's kind of funny to see over the years, like who, like it just pick up steam of just
Mm,
Pinterest and this and that. Um, but I think that whether you watch those shows or not, I think that we all see, I mean, like any craft, it looks so easy when a professional is
mm,
doing it, right? They just ice
yeah.
it and they stack it and it boom, and it's a giant cake for this party. But there's a lot of options for just and it's a decorating store, so we don't bake at all, but we have a bunch of supplies for you to do your own baking and decorating. And I asked my mom just like how much supplies they had in their own little store, and they had about like 6,000 items,
Mm,
which is insane. And we all see people like piping with like tips and everything, and that might look simple, but there's like over like 200 tips of that. So it is quite elaborate, just like any other art, which is kind of cool, very cool. And just like any other art, like architecture, you like need a lot of what's it called, stands like within foundation
mm,
within a cake if you're going to
right.
stack it on. So I think that was just really cool, just to, like reminisce about um, all the items that are just like involved in decorating itself. Like we have like
Mm,
edible glitter, we have like edible like silver, and like not just like
wow.
cookie cutters. Yeah, there's like a lot going on. So yeah, anyone interested, there is a big alley to go down for it. So
Dang. Edible silver? That's like,
mhm.
never heard of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
that could just be me. I mean, I've never heard of that.
it's funny because now it's technically in California has to be labeled as not edible, but
Ah.
all everyone that's like 50 and older is like, oh, I grew up eating this like as a child, so I'm gonna ignore that label, and I'm like, okay, so yeah, a lot though.
Dang. Well, I mean, that's also like really, really cool that you mentioned how your love for the art also translates for your love or appreciation for cakes or just pastries in general. I
Yeah.
think that for me during this quarantine pandemic time, what I'm watching on TV is a lot of food shows, right? So I'm
Mm.
watching a lot of food shows, and the more I just come to be more immersed in the culinary arts, and then just seeing all these different types of food industries prosper, right? Or not prosper, but at the same time, just seeing everyone think about food a little in a different light outside of just something that we eat, right? It's also an art form, And
Yeah.
I'm coming to just see the ways that people approach food and how people are getting so creative with like food science. I know is a huge thing in Davis, right? But
Yeah.
also, you know, for someone that didn't study food science, and just watching food shows on TV, but also hearing about the kind of ingredients or the kind of components of what it means to make a cake, it's all of an art form because
Yeah.
everything has to work in unison. Everything has to work on this chemical level so that it comes out good. And like you said, like edible silver, that's crazy, right? You tell that to a kid, and you know it's like eating silver. That's like that's so foreign, but at the same time too, I'm sure that like that's a very important component to how the cake tastes or how to any pastry tastes, right? And it's cool to hear that um, that the store has thrived for so long. So I'm so sorry that it's closed out after like 6 decades. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy to me, and that's like 3 lifetimes for us, you know. I mean, or like
Oh
you know,
gosh.
that's 3 times our age is what I mean, and you know, just to see how long it's made an impact. Talk about how big of an impact that store has had on your local community.
Yeah. Wow. Where do I begin with that? So again, it's definitely been something I grew up with or grew up in. And then I'd come and do kids camps over the summer, which hosted like 15 preteens just to do like cakes and cupcakes. And so a lot of families are involved. A lot of people return every year for that camp. They return every year for gingerbread house decorating um, in the holiday time. And so a lot of it is just like traditions for people, which is so lovely. And um, I, again, wasn't so involved after high school because that's when I moved to
Hmm.
Davis. And I'd come and help
Right.
out during holidays, but my sister really like took the reins on it and all. And my mom obviously was there too. And so they know everyone like name and face, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a beauty of these last few weeks, this last month of just announcing that we're closing. It was really hard. I mean, a lot of
I'm
people came
sure.
in and just poured their heart out. I mean, like,
Oh.
we have so many memories here, and to see that so many people have the same was touching and
Mm,
also so sad at the same time because
yeah.
we had so many stories. I mean, given that it's again like 6 decades. It's had a
Yeah.
long history, like all within the same city. And so a lot of people came in being like, you can't close, like I've come here
Yeah.
since my son was born, and like we've come every year to like decorate his birthday cake, and now he's in his
Oh,
30s. And it's like that. I'm
dang.
just oh man. And other stories of, we come here every year to get gingerbread houses for like us and our neighbors, and it's our tradition every year. And so seeing what a big component it was in so many lives and so many communities. I think
Mm,
that although it's so sad to see it going, I know it's not just my story, right, that it's impacting. I think that it's really beautiful in the end just to look at all the communities it has brought together, all the memories it's facilitated besides just mine.
right.
And it's been so heartwarming too because my mom, I've just heard her say like many times, like I've loved running the store so much, of just everyone who comes in here, it's like for a celebration. Everyone who comes in here, it's because they're doing something for someone else, and like I love to be a part of that. And I'm like, oh, it's just yeah. So very sweet woman. I'm proud to be her daughter.
Oh.
Um,
Shout out
yeah,
to Mama Collins.
Mama Collins. Yeah. She'll watch this later. um, yeah. So I think that, although again, it's very sad, it's very meaningful that I think it's brought together so many people, so many celebrations, all that. So, yeah.
The beauty of cakes, right? It's a place
Mm-hmm.
of celebration, like you said, a place of joy, and it's a very bittersweet moment that a place that brought so much joy is, you know, having its doors closed. So
Yeah.
we appreciate what it's done for others, and that's what we hold on to, and hopefully, maybe one day it will continue to bring joy to that
Mm-hmm.
community.
Yeah.
But all right, wrapping up, Em, thinking about all the things that we've been through, thinking about all the things that you've been through in your life, a lot of good things, a lot of downside for what it is, looking at hindsight. So you're at a dinner table, okay? So imagine yourself at a dinner table. You're on one side, it's a dark room, one light right down the middle. On the other side of that table is 18-year-old Emily, just
Wow.
sitting. Okay. If you can describe one crazy, significant thing about your current lifestyle to 18-year-old Emily that would have never expected, what would you say to her?
Um, yeah. I don't think it's a surprise that I moved across country. I think I was down for that. I think that just
Mm,
doing it though was terrifying. But I did it. So I don't think that would
yep.
be so surprising. I know that when we're in a tough spot, it's so hard to hear encouragement, right? Because you never actually believe it until you experience it yourself.
Right.
But I guess in just one way or another, I would just say like, like you made it, like you are good enough.
There you
And
go.
yeah, and again, I think that's part of like the faith itself is just not knowing that.
Right.
But maybe, telling a younger me, giving that encouragement would save a lot of just stress and frustration and heartache
Mm,
over a lot of things. So I think that would, even though that sounds really lame, it's not a big significant moment, but I
no.
think it's just in general lifestyle of just saying it, pursue your passions and it'll pay off. I think for
Yep.
sure. Keep doing keep following that route of just things that you find that you love, and
Hmm.
it'll definitely get you where you need to go. Which sounds kind of like out of a cheesy movie, but I mean, I feel like it's a common saying for like a reason, right? It's just I think
Yeah.
that a lot of people need to hear that.
Yep.
So
Cliche or not, getting over insecurities is not an easy thing,
yeah.
right? So we can hear it all the time. Pursue your passion. You're good enough. Blah blah blah. Although it's true, like you said, we don't believe it until we feel it, right?
Mhm.
So we can hear it in a podcast. We can hear it from a friend. We can hear it from a family member all the time. Um, but like you said, it means something different when you go through it. You just have to keep fighting for that opportunity to experience it, right?
Yeah.
So you can hear it all you want. Just have faith that in that moment, when the time comes, you'll actually understand it for what it is. So for everyone listening, if you don't feel like you're good enough, you are good enough. You don't have to take my word for it. Take whatever word for it, or take
Take
it
my
for
word.
whatever it is. But at the end of it, you'll find it down the line. So
Yeah.
keep it through. Emily, I appreciate you. I've always have. I don't say it enough, but I'm saying it enough now. Continue to be who you are. I feel like you're such a light for the people around you. So especially in nursing school, pursuing what the position, pursuing the passion, pursuing the occupation that you've always dreamed, or not always dreamed, but now that you dream for yourself and to be in the position that you are now, continue to just be you, because no other person needs a different nurse than M. M is the perfect nurse for the people out there. So
Ready.
continue to have that heart for what it means to be a true nurse, to be a justice nurse, right? To be just as a nurse. Continue on helping people navigate those conversations of what it means to understand politics and healthcare. Thank you so much for giving me a space to navigate those conversations, right? It's not every day where we get to navigate those conversations. So thank you for giving that into light, and thank you for giving inspiration for everyone to keep pursuing what they believe they should be doing, because they should absolutely be doing what they want for themselves in some way, shape, or form. So thanks, Em, for always believing in yourself and believing in the other people around you.
Oh, thanks, Gus. And thanks, yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, thanks just for reminding me of a lot of, again,
Mm,
we've been through it together. And so it's
yep.
very wonderful and nostalgic just to be reminded of what the journey has been from the get-go. So
Mm,
yeah, again, I do hope that it inspires somebody on here if they're in the gap year, if they're in the medical journey. Also, it's a rough one, but
mm.
you can do it. So yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate all my viewers as always. Keep the conversations going. Until the next time, Em, I'll see you later.
Sounds good. Bye, Cass.
Bye.